LSAC didn't touch a single question on the LSAT, but the August LSAT could still be harder than the one people took last year because they've made the LSAT honest again. So what happened? LSAC has killed the at-home remote LSAT. Their reason is security, but nobody's telling you what that is going to do to your number because the June LSAT is the last LSAT you have the option to take from home. After that, starting with August and beyond, almost everybody is sitting for the LSAT in person at a Prometric testing center. And there are a few narrow exceptions like medical stuff or if you have real hardship getting to a testing center. But for most people, that option is gone. You can't take it from home at your desk in your pajamas. Now we could talk about where the testing centers are, what to bring, when to show up, and that's helpful, but also it's kind of boring and it skips the only thing that matters, what actually changes for you. Now the question is, why would LSAC blow up? Why would they end a format that hundreds of thousands of people loved? They spent 5+ years building up. Officially, the reason is testing security. This past August, the LSAT had to shut down the entire online option in mainland China due to reports of widespread organized cheating. These were serious, sophisticated cheating operations. Now, of course, if the problem was just with one particular region, they would have shut it down only in that region, but they decided to scrap at-home testing for the entire planet. And that tells us the problem was more widespread. Now, we can look at the impact in terms of LSAT score inflation. A 170 today puts you in the 95th percentile. But 10 years ago, that same 170 was close to the 98th percentile, top 2.5%. And so the percentage of people clearing a 170 roughly doubled over that period. A 175 used to be the top 0.5%. Now it's the top 1%. And the LSAT is supposed to be equated. And that's a fancy word, but it's a pretty simple idea. It means a 170 is supposed to mean the same thing today that it did 10 years ago. Now, the LSAT questions haven't gotten significantly easier, and so there are a couple of explanations here. Either everybody got a whole lot smarter all at the same time, or some of those scores aren't legit. And of course, part of it is definitely real, don't get me wrong. People study harder and better than they used to. The quality of materials is better. A lot fewer people are using LSAT for dummies, for example. They're using more specialized boutique options to study for the LSAT, specializing in LSAT prep particularly, and that has been slowly nudging up scores. But it kept climbing up through the remote testing era faster and faster. Then LSAC turned around and scrapped remote testing over cheating that they called widespread and systemic. And the cheating has been part of that trend towards higher scores. And you can't tell apart who's cheating, who's not, just by looking at the chart. So what is it? Probably a bit of both. But nobody can tell you how much of that record high curve is talent and how much is noise, but it's not slowing down regardless. This cycle, the people scoring 170 plus grew faster than the applicant pool did. So who actually eats this? Who bears the consequences? You do. This cycle in two ways. One of them is that you're going to take the LSAT in person starting in August. And you might think, I'll be fine, plenty of people do it in person. But the thing is that your studying is happening at home. Every practice test, all your drilling, all your lessons, all happen at home in the comfort at your own desk. And so if you're taking it inside a testing center, it's going to be a different experience, different building, a line to check in, an unfamiliar chair, somebody 2 feet away sniffing through the hardest passage of your life. And this is a test where a few seconds determines what school you get into. Now, keep in mind that with LSAT score medians rising, you've got to clear an inflated bar with a score that doesn't benefit from the same conditions that led to the inflation. In other words, you're competing against folks who took the LSAT at home in a more familiar environment, some of whom may have cheated. I'm not saying that's the only factor leading to score inflation, but it's part of it. And it probably won't continue to the same extent, although it may continue to some extent because people who are determined enough to cheat, in some cases to cheat for profit, they're going to find ways to circumvent the rules around at in-person testing. Because there are exceptions to remote testing. If you have medical hardship, if you live really far from a testing center, LSAC will let those folks take it from home. And so all you could do as a consequence is fight that much harder to get a higher score, to put in the work, to study properly, and to also properly simulate test day conditions. And so starting today, every practice session should feel like the room that you're going to be sitting in, not taking these tests in your bed, not taking them at home. You want to go somewhere public with noise you can't turn off, with an uncomfortable chair, a clock that you can't pause. You want to do timed sections at the library where nobody owes you quiet and you can't wander off to get a snack. You want to make the real test day experience boring because you've already been through it 10, 15, 20 times. And then you also want to fix the way you review. Take a practice test, check the answers, but don't just then jump into another test. You want to go back into every single miss and rebuild your reasoning until you get confident to the point that you could never fall for that trap again. I call my process, my version of this, the Socratic review method. And it's really not that complicated. You just want to cross-examine your own wrong answer like a prosecutor would. You want to ask yourself, why did I pick this? What did the test want me to assume? What would the right answer have to look like before I even read the options? Do that with real discipline, and then your increase will become real. That's how I got my own score up from a 152 to a 175. And that right there is the difference between those who plateau and those who increase their scores. And if you want help actually building that kind of study process, engaging in that review process, preparing for the upcoming LSAT changes in August and beyond, the return to in-person testing, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now and later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. You can grab that free cheat sheet at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. It's a quick reference on everything logical reasoning and reading comprehension. Free download PDF. You can grab it right now. Links in my bio, links below the video. Happy to help. I see questions here in the chat. Happy to answer whatever I can on LSAT and law school admissions. Feel free to drop your questions in. I see Budley is asking about a 175. So a 175 puts you in the top 1% of all test takers as of the current percentiles. Back when I took the LSAT, I think it was the top 0.5%. So pretty good score, above the medians for all of the T14s. And so if your GPA is below a 3.9 or so, you're going to want your LSAT to be a 175 plus, because the top 14 law schools all have GPA medians of 392 to 399. And so if you're below on the GPA median, you want to be above the LSAT range of 170 to 174. So a 175 puts you in a pretty good place for that. ICT says first practice test was a 154, last practice test was a 173, 167 on the actual. Okay, so you raised your practice test up roughly 20 points, then dropped down 6 points on the actual day. And that's unfortunately all too common, because the thing is that most students drop roughly 5 to 8 points from their practice tests to the actual exam. And so you want to raise that baseline. You want to have a buffer in place in case you have a bad proctor, in case you have a tech issue, in case you experience nerves or anxiety. And that's part of why I'm so big on properly simulating test day conditions to mitigate the potential for that kind of test day score drop. And so when I talk about the return to in-person testing, it's going to become that much more important to properly simulate test day conditions to avoid experiencing that drop. If you're taking the LSAT in June, as Devin is, good luck, Devin, by the way, then you want to think through, are you taking it remotely or are you taking it in person? If you're taking it remotely, test day conditions are not going to be as unfamiliar because you'll presumably be taking it in the same room, the same desk where you did all your studying. When you're taking it in person at a testing center, then taking your practice tests in that less comfortable environment with some ambient noise and distractions around you, like maybe going to a coffee shop or a library, becomes that much more important. In the final week before the test, I don't recommend doing anything crazy, nothing radically new. You really want to focus more on maybe taking one practice test, reviewing it in depth, looking at your mistakes. That's it. You don't want to burn yourself out. You want to go in feeling fresh, feeling cool, feeling confident, and ready to crush it. And then, of course, look at where you're scoring relative to your goals. If you're not at or above your goal score, maybe you think about pushing back your LSAT to August or September, or retaking it in August or September, just to give yourself a bit more time. And you could, for peace of mind, sign up for the August LSAT just in case. Even if you're not sure you're actually going to need the August LSAT, it can help to reduce your stress because then you're going to know that, hey, you know what? While the LSAT as a whole is incredibly important, of course, no one particular test date will make or break you. And so it could give you some peace of mind to have signed up for the August LSAT just in case, so you know that even if things don't go your way on June, you've still got a backup test date in mind. I see Sean says, got a 132 on my first test and a 164 on my highest. Definitely recommend classes and coaching. Okay, so you got a 32-point increase over the course of your studying. That's a great increase. Congrats on that, Sean. In terms of classes and coaching, we do offer that. We offer personalized coaching programs at LSAT Unplugged. We focus more on the personalized support because it's honestly more impactful because it gives you the structure and the accountability rather than just giving you a login with a bunch of videos and saying, go figure it out on your own. And so we look at what's your current starting point, what's your goal score, what's your time frame, and then we map out an action plan to get you from your starting point up to your goal score between now and then. And so that could involve private one-on-one coaching, could involve live small group sessions, could involve on-demand courses, could involve a custom study plan. Typically, it involves some combination of all of the above. As for how we dial up the frequency of each of those metrics, it depends on when you're taking the LSAT, what your goal score is, how much you're looking to improve, and how much time you can put in per day and per week between now and your target test date. And so we always adjust the particulars to your particulars. And so if you want to talk it through, the best way to determine a personal plan for you would be to book that free tutoring with me. I see Zaya's asking, I got a 147 on my LSAT diagnostic. I didn't even really apply myself. Isn't that good or no? Well, if you didn't apply yourself on it, then presumably you would have done better had you applied yourself. And so my thought is you probably would have gotten at least the 150s if you'd actually tried. My question is, why don't you try? If we want to get a better, accurate read of what you're actually capable of, let's have you take a practice test where you actually put in the effort. Otherwise, you're selling yourself short and you're underperforming deliberately, which, to be frank, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I get that maybe you were kind of just half in, half out, but now let's actually have you take a practice test where you're giving it some serious effort and see where you end up. And that'll be a more realistic indication of where you stand, what you're capable of at this point in time today. The thing is, of course, that if you haven't properly studied yet, it's still not going to reflect what you're actually capable of. A cold diagnostic just tells you that you haven't yet put in the time, but of course you can. The LSAT is kind of like a foreign language when you're starting off with it. And so, of course, if you take a test in a foreign language, it's not going to go well because you haven't learned it yet. Once you learn the basics, the different sections, the different question types, you actually attempt to build a strong foundation, then you'll get a more realistic depiction of what you're capable of. And so let's think about what are the phases of LSAT prep. You can take questions by type in drilling, building a strong foundation, getting the lay of the land in terms of the different sections and the different question types. Then we move on to pacing and time management, doing individual sections, and finally pulling it all together with full-length timed practice tests. And so let's look at what's your target test date, how many hours per day and per week can you put in between now and then we can craft an action plan to get you from here to there. I see Ash is asking thoughts and advice on working towards law school several years after completing undergrad. Totally fine. I mean, a lot of folks go to law school as so-called non-traditional applicants, and your work experience can help you with admissions. So definitely highlight that in your resume, in your application essays. You don't have to go straight from undergrad to law school. And in fact, a lot of law schools love so-called non-traditional older applicants. Just make sure that you highlight your work experience and make a clear, compelling reason for why you want to go to law school now. I see No is asking, is the essay part still important? If by essay part you mean the writing sample, it's never been important because it's not scored. So why would you devote effort to what's not scored at the expense of what is scored? The scored portions of the LSAT, the multiple choice, the logical reasoning, and reading comp, that's what really matters. And listen, if you're getting 170, 175, 180, and you're feeling pretty good about your score, then of course you could talk about the writing sample. but the writing sample isn't nearly as important. And so I would never want you to spend time on what is not scored until you've locked down what is scored. Now, there are some cases where the writing sample is more important than otherwise. For example, if you are a non-native English speaker, if the admissions will have questions about your English fluency, then yes, of course, give it a bit more effort to show that you are fluent in English. And the writing sample could become a little bit more important now that people are having ChatGPT write their admissions essays. But until they scored, I wouldn't really care that much about it in most cases. I will caveat this that LSAC has indicated that at some point in the next couple of years, they will start to score the writing sample. At the earliest, that would happen summer of next year. So you've still got roughly a year till that would happen at the earliest. But they will announce that several months in advance. And for anyone taking the LSAT in the next year, that's not going to apply. I see In-N-Out Burgers asking, advice for my 5th attempt? Scary since it's the last one I can do. I'm really pushing to get high 160s to 170. Highest official so far is a 159. Okay, so we're on attempt number 5 here. The question I have is, how did you study for your previous 4 attempts? Is there a way that you could level up in your studying going forward? Is there a course or coaching that you could have taken advantage of that you have not yet, that you think would make a difference for you? Have you been self-studying with textbooks and ChatGPT and practice tests, or have you taken a private course with live support or gotten one-on-one coaching? Because the thing is that when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. But once we add some support into the mix, there's usually a pretty quick score boost, meaning there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit. And if you have gotten a tutor, have you also gotten guidance on what to do outside of the tutoring? Is your tutor creating for you a personalized study plan, mapping out exactly what to do day by day from now till the test? Is that covering when to drill LSAT questions by type, when to do timed sections, when to take full-length practice tests? Or are they just kind of saying, do a practice test between now and the next meeting? The more guidance you get, the more structure you have in your prep outside of the one-on-one coaching, the more you're going to improve. And so I would look at critically what your support has been like up to this point. Where has it been lacking? Do you want to try a different approach? Because ultimately, you've got to change the variables to change the equation. If you've done it 4 times and having cracked into the 160s, something's got to change. And this is your last attempt. There are retake limits 5 times in 5 years. And so we want to make sure your next LSAT is your last LSAT, and that's going to involve changing up something. And so if you want to talk through what that could look like for you, how we might be able to help, you can book the free LSAT tutoring with me. The link to book that free tutoring lesson is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video, pinned in the chat, in my bio as well. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. You can grab that free cheat sheet at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. We could talk through it more. Ash is asking, what are your thoughts on dual JD programs? It depends on your long-term goals, but generally speaking. Well, I mean, your long-term goals is everything. I mean, the question becomes, why do you want to pursue a dual degree? What are your career goals? Do they really require this? If you're looking at JD MBA, for example, which is a pretty common route a lot of folks go, or JD PhD or JD MD, I mean, the question is, what specifically are you hoping to achieve that's going to require 3, 4, 5+ years of graduate school and a whole lot of money in tuition? I think the JD MBA is the most common one I typically hear about. And I think that this is just my personal opinion, but the MBA has become less and less valuable over time as business has shifted. Tech has increased in importance, and the idea of being a bit more nimble and quick versus the big bureaucracy, managerial class type of professions have diminished in importance. And so your mileage may vary, look into particularly what you want to do, but I would think that a JD alone might be sufficient for a lot of things. And the question becomes like, do you just like school a lot and you don't want to actually have a job? Like, is that what this is about? For some people, I think it is. They're perpetual students for life. I mean, if it's me, my thought is, let me get the degree. Let me start working, paying off that debt if I have debt, start climbing the ladder to whatever I ultimately want to do. I mean, you don't want to be 30, 40 years old having never had a job yet. For most of us, at least. So think through what you want to do. talk to people working in the real world and ask them what degrees they needed, if any. Sometimes it turns out the job that you want doesn't require the degree that you thought it did. And sometimes having more concrete real world work experience matters more to employers than the degree that you have. Ask yourself if a JD alone is sufficient. Alexander's asking, I have a hard time understanding how much time I should be committing to studying and how intense. So what's your current score and what's your goal score? I would want to know that to get a sense of how much work you're going to need to put in here. If you want a 170, 175, and you're currently in the below 165 range, it's probably going to require a lot of work. It's harder to go from a 164 to a 174 than to go from a 144 to a 154. The higher up you're looking to climb, the harder it is to get each additional point. That's diminishing marginal returns, but there's also a lot of value in getting each additional point as we get into that 170 plus threshold. And a 170 puts you in the top 5% or so, the 175 puts you in the top 1% or so. And so if you want to achieve a top 5% or top 1% score, you've got to study differently. And frankly, you've got to study more than the vast majority of people. I mean, think about it like Olympic athletes or professional musicians. Like, they are going to extremes. They're not asking how much do I have to do, or how, the other way to frame it is how little could I get away with doing and still achieve a result. That's the wrong way to look at it, right? It's more like, how can I max it out? You don't want to burn out, of course. And the LSAT is not a memorization test. It's a test of skills and pattern recognition. It happens over a longer period of time, typically more than just a month or two. But you've got to put in the time. You've got to put in the volume of questions. There are 60 or so released LSAT practice tests. There's about 8,000 LSAT practice questions available to you on LawHub. You're going to want to do the majority of them. And that's going to take time. But there are benefits to that. There are major returns on that. I mean, if you want to go to a top 14 law school, the LSAT medians range from 170 to 174. Top 5% plus. And so you've got to put in the work, but there's benefits there. I see Alexander says, I'm at a 152 with little to no prep. I don't think I'm going to get close to a 170. Well, if you don't think you will, you probably won't, because you won't put in the work that would be necessary to get there. On the other hand, if you approach it from the perspective of, I'm determined to get to the 170 plus, what would it take to get there? How would I need to restructure my schedule, my life, to get to that result? Understanding it's not going to happen overnight. Then we could have a very different conversation. I mean, the LSAT's offered 8 times a year. Coming up, you've got August, September, October, and November this calendar year. You could take any one of those LSATs. You could even take all of those LSATs and still apply to law school this fall. And do you think there is anybody out there who is starting off with a perfectly average score of a 151, 152, which is right in the middle, who's going to end up with a 170 plus this calendar year? I'll bet a lot of people are. I know a lot of them who do this every single year. I encounter them. They're my students. To improve 20 points in 2, 3, 4, 5 months is doable. I'm not going to say everybody gets there. Ultimately, your improvement is going to be a function of the amount that you study and the way in which you study. And I can't make you any promises or guarantees that you're going to get there in particular. But in aggregate, I could say that many people will. And then we reverse engineer what have top scorers done that led them to get to those results. Again, the function of the amount that you study and the way in which you study. And so the amount would be number of hours you put in per day and per week, number of weeks you put in. I can't promise that anybody taking the LSAT 1 week from now is going to improve 20 points. I don't like to make outlandish claims or promise overnight success. But if you're willing to put in 2, 3, 4, 5 months of at least 5, 10 hours a week minimum, ideally closer to 15, 20 hours a week, we can get you a pretty significant increase if you're willing to put in the work. And then what does that work look like? It involves following a study plan, laying out exactly what to do every single day, building a strong foundation in the different sections and the different question types, doing individual sections to work on pacing and time management, and ultimately full-length exams to build up your endurance. A proper study plan will involve all of those to some degree. And then being willing to be self-critical, looking at your weak areas, reviewing properly. And if it were easy, everybody would do it. We can make it relatively easier for you by showing you the way forward and to show you what to work on. Ultimately, though, I can't care more about it than you care about it, because I'm not going to show up at your house and wake you up early on a Saturday morning and force you to study. But if you're willing to put in the work and set your alarm every now and then and block off some time on your schedule and back burner some other stuff, we can get you there. And so if you want to talk through what that could look like, you could book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. That link is unpluggedprep.com/start. It's below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube. It's in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. And so the offer is there. It's ultimately on you to take me up on it. I know some folks will, some folks won't, and we'll just go back to whatever they were doing before. Maybe something changes, maybe they don't, but the offer is available to you. What we do is we create for you a personalized coaching program, laying out exactly what to do, giving you personalized one-on-one coaching, live small group sessions in addition to that, customized study plan, on-demand course. We personalize every program to the student. I see Ash is asking about this as well. Ash, I'm happy to meet with you as well and talk through what your program could look like too. I see Vlad is asking, is the best way to improve with reading comprehension just practice? I mean, the way to improve at anything is proper practice and analysis. So you have theory, you have application, you have post-game analysis and review. And so the theory would be building a strong foundation, understanding the different sections, the different question types. And reading comp is learnable as well, by the way. A lot of folks say you can't improve at reading comp, and they're totally wrong. A reading comp passage is like a big logical reasoning argument, maybe multiple arguments, but the same principles apply. There are patterns inherent to reading comprehension, just like there are in logical reasoning. There are some common structures or skeletons that LSAC reuses again and again with reading comp, and people typically don't spot them because they get overly focused on the topic, whether it's natural science or social science or humanities or law. But there are patterns in reading comp too, and we can help you uncover those and determine them and understand them better. I see Vlad is asking, does applying as a 20-year-old hurt or help your chances for law school and graduating undergrad early? Well, kudos to you for graduating early. I don't know that it'll hurt you necessarily. What happens for those who are going directly from undergrad into law school is that your GPA matters more than it would otherwise, because work experience is not taking up a big chunk of the pie like it would otherwise. And so you want to make sure that you have a really solid GPA if you're applying straight from undergrad. If your GPA is not what you would have liked it to be, your LSAT score, of course, becomes more important to offset that. Maybe you want to get a little bit of work experience or take some community college classes if your BA is not yet complete, to try and boost it up a little bit. I'm just scanning through for more questions here, anything I may have missed. I see Aiden's asking, I got a 145 and I thought I studied well. How should I improve? I studied for around 2 months. Okay, so if you thought you studied well, then you would have seen practice test results reflecting the work that you thought you did, not what you actually did, right? In other words, like, your practice test results become an early indicator of how your prep is going. So if you're telling me that you got a 145 on your official LSAT and you were taken by surprise by that, my thought would be, what did your practice test look like in the lead up to that official exam? Like, were you scoring in the 160s and dropped 15 points or more? Or were you not taking practice tests at all? Or were you taking 4 individual sections, adding them up, and calling them a full practice test? I see Matt's asking about deviation from practice scores to actual exam. I mean, most students' scores drop 5 to 8 points from the practice to the actual because, in many cases, they're not properly simulating test day conditions. If you are properly simulating test day conditions, then you won't be surprised by your actual official LSAT result, because you're going to determine that you'll get a proper indication of where you are based on those practice tests. And you don't want to over-index on any one result, of course. You want to take the average of your most recent 5 practice tests, and that'll be a reasonable indication of where you actually stand. So you take your practice tests 1 or 2 a week, you review them in depth, and you look for the trend to be going up, of course, as you get more familiar with the demands of a full exam, considering pacing and time management and endurance. Your practice tests get better and better over time, and if they drop, you look at why, you course correct, you drill your weak areas on the side as well. You take them under strict timed conditions, and if you're taking the LSAT in August or beyond, as I imagine most of you are, you're going to be taking them in some environment with ambient noise or distractions like a coffee shop or a library, because the testing center itself will also have some distractions there as well. And for those just joining, by the way, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you're watching this. If you find these helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. So I do appreciate your support spreading the word. I see Aiden says, I had a 155 on the last practice test I took, but I only did like 3 practice tests. My highest was a 157. Okay, so a couple of things. One is that 3 exams is not enough. I would have had you do at least 10 to 15 full length practice tests so that test day itself feels like just another run through and you've done it all before. I would also want to make sure those practice tests are strictly timed, 2 sections back to back, a 10-minute break, 2 more sections back to back, and that's your test, all in one sitting of about 2.5 hours. So make sure if you're taking the LSAT in August, you're doing at least 1 test a week. That's going to add up to about 10 of them. If you have more time in your schedule, you could do maybe 2 exams a week as long as you're reviewing them in depth. Thanks for joining, folks. Hope you found this helpful. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. If you haven't already, you can book the free LSAT lesson with me, unpluggedprep.com/start. You can grab the free LSAT cheat sheet at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Links below the video, in the chat, in my bio. I'll see you all tomorrow, Monday. In the meantime, all the best. Take care. Thanks for joining.